Hello, everyone. My name is Owen Finch, and today I will be presenting on the Phipps site, which is site number 13, CK21 in the archaeological classification system. And this location is located in northwestern Iowa. The Phipps site is located 3 miles north of Cherokee, Iowa, which is the closest city there. It falls in between Route 59 and Route 3, and so we'll talk about more specifically where it's at here in a second. Paul C. Phipps is the landowner there, so that's why it's named the Phipps site. It is a agricultural area. It's relatively open. There are some homes that are encroaching on the site itself, but as of yet, it is still a relatively open area right on the bank of Mill Creek. Mill Creek is an important part of this whole story, and we'll talk about the Mill Creek culture, the Mill Creek people, and surrounding areas that also have some of those same identifiers as Mill Creek. Here's a couple of topographical maps so you can actually see the geography of where we're working with. On the left here, we have this site kind of cordoned off, and these are specific locations. You can see that it's a relatively flat area, and over here it's more defined. 13CK21 falls right here. And you can see it's mostly open, and it's of course right on that riverbank there. So if you'll give me a second here, we'll actually get out of PowerPoint and I'll go into a map here. This is Iowa, Sioux City's there, and if you come in, you'll see Cherokee. So this is the city of Cherokee, where the Phipps site's located, and just 3 miles or so north on Route 59. I think I passed it here actually. We have Mill Creek, and you can see this tributary comes around, and the Mill Creek site is located right within here. So you can see the kind of layout of the land. Again, very flat. If you imagine there's no highway through here, it would just be an open area of land, and that's where we'll be talking about today. Is this area within here? So back to our PowerPoint here. Again, relatively flat, and you can see that from topography. Here's a picture of the actual site. This picture, I believe, is from 1963 excavation, and we'll talk about the different excavations that have occurred at Phipps site. But again, you got good cover. There's some trees, but it's generally open. And obviously here you can see that the Mill Creek is not a heavy, fast, rapid river flow. It's relatively calm, and Mill Creek itself is a tributary of the Little Sioux River. The Little Sioux River runs and eventually becomes the Missouri River, and these river systems will be important for later on. But to understand the Phipps site entirely, we have to first understand the Mill Creek culture. And the Mill Creek culture is one that existed from 900 to 1400 AD. This would put it in a late prehistoric period. And this site has many of the late prehistoric attributes, and we'll talk about all of those here in a second. The Mill Creek culture is typically defined as Middle Missouri tradition with Mississippian overtones. So it's kind of this eclectic mix of different types of cultures that were present in the time. They were a semi-sedentary people. They were people that came to a location and they would set up shop, and they were hunters and agrarians, so they were using the land to survive. On the right here, we have a table where you can see these are bones that were collected from the Phipps site, and we see over 600 bison bones and only 167 deer bones, a few beaver, a few elk, but really what we're seeing is a huge reliance on bison, and that would be common for the time, and it was certainly a big part of their culture. These bones that were recovered could have been trash, they could have been discarded, but typically these bones would also be utilized for tools, and the Mill Creek people were always using different types of bone tools, pottery, and stone tools to get through their daily lives. The primary thing that we see with Mill Creek culture are these fortified small villages. And in the Phipps site, that doesn't exist. There's no indication that there was a fortified, small, compact, dense village. And in fact, when excavations began, there was no even indication that there were house plots, right? It wasn't obvious um, off the bat. So when did excavations begin? The first indication that there was any type of work being done at Phipps site was in 1939. Elias and Orr did the primary orders of trying to figure out or investigate this area. In 1955 and 56, the Iowa Archaeological Society did a lot of work there. But in 1963, the University of Wisconsin comes in and gives us the biggest sample of the Phipps site, and they were responsible for the largest excavation. Again, there's one after that in around 75, and there is an additional one in 1994. 1994 is important because, of course, in 1993 there was, the Great Flood of '93, which affected much of the Midwest area. Because of that, your surface soil and erosion occurs, and the surface soil is different because of erosion, and there's a new chance to investigate the site. In that site, they recovered bones that were from as few as 3 people to as many as 7 people, among other artifacts. The Mill Creek people, and specifically people at Phipps, were always using pottery. This pottery, there were 4 distinguished types of pottery that were found. There was Sanford ware, Chamberlain ware, Foreman ware, and the Mill Creek ware. Basically, the distinctions on all of these are the Sanford ware was a L-shaped rim. The Chamberlain ware was a simple L-shaped. The Foreman ware was a complicated S-shape, and the Mill Creek ware was unmodified, simple. All of these pots were globular. They were grit tempered, and they typically were smooth. They were also very decorative. They were not the utilitarian type pots that you can see in other earlier cultures. These were absolutely decorative. They were elaborate, probably held a significant religious meaning as well. And we can actually see this here. This is a good sample. But just looking at the globular pots, again, smooth, decorated. This one a relatively simple rim. As far as the excavation goes, the 63 excavation used 3-foot squares at 6-inch levels, sometimes getting as deep as 10 feet. So it just depends. The report on going 10 feet, though, says that it's not as efficient, and there's a potential to lose some artifacts. So they did not, they kept it pretty standard as far as site excavation goes. Here's a depiction of the pottery sherds that were recovered. Again, these are intricate designs. These were people that took pride in their work, and they did not just use, pottery as a means to an end. This was something that was artistic to them. And here again, we have the kind of classic collection of Mill Creek artifacts. This is 2 globular plots, 3 smaller type bowls, and down here we can see the projectile points that were used, as well as the bones that were used as tools. This is a good snapshot of what the Phipps site had to offer. Before I talk about where the Mill Creek people went, it's important to mention that relatively close, within a few miles, is the Matt Brewster site. The Brewster site is, again, a snapshot of this Mill Creek type culture. And that proximity is important because it relates to how the Mill Creek people fell off the face of the earth. There was a clear period of them, and then they're not seen again as far as the typical Mill Creek culture attributes. One theory is that there were hostile groups in the area. There was, we know these areas have different groups throughout. It could be that a hostile group came in. There's no indication that anything happened, that any interaction with other tribes was peaceful. So it's possible that's a reason. It's possible that there was climate change occurring, making agriculture difficult, as well as hunting. Again, these people relied so heavily on the bison that if there was a change in that population because of climate, they're going to have to move to a better location. And that's probably what happened. Was a migration occurred. They go follow the Little Sioux River up to the Missouri River, ultimately falling into other tribes in the general proximity and becoming a part of those cultures as we know. So you would, instead of seeing a clear period of Mill Creek and then to another period, there would be a blend, and the blend is so smooth that there's no indication of where Mill Creek stopped and another culture began. Um, Overall, the Phipps site was a fruitful excavation done throughout, starting in the early 40s all the way up until the early 2000s. There were a number of artifacts recovered here, and it's a good snapshot of the Mill Creek people. Um, Lastly, I just have references. I do want to mention that the staff over at State Archaeologist Lab was very helpful and put together a lot of this information. So I hope you enjoy, and we will see you.